Welcome to Ward Talk. I'm Bonnie Gabowitz, your host, and on this show, we talk about the challenges and solutions of the city of Ann Arbor. Today, we're talking to a council member from Ward 3, and that's Julie Grand. Julie, you've been on the council for quite a few years. How many years has it been?
6.5. So since November 2014.
Yeah, so you've been to a lot of meetings and you've had to make a lot of decisions. So it will be really good to hear from you because we have so much going on in the city. Let's just start briefly with Ward 3. I know you said there was some activity going on in Packard that you're very excited about.
Sure. So one of the things that, based on a meeting last night with the Planning and Transportation Commission, we'll be having the return of an improved Healthy Streets initiative this summer that was really popular with a lot of residents, both for safety within their neighborhoods and then also to have some temporary protected bike lanes along Packard, which I know I heard from many residents, oh, I can now cycle all the way from my neighborhood to the farmer's market and feel safe. So that opens up a lot of mobility options for people in the warmer weather and gives us a chance to try some potential long-term routes out. We've also had a lot of development that's been approved in the ward recently. So we have plenty of new neighbors that will be welcoming, both on the south side of town. We also have one of the largest, gains in terms of affordable housing for seniors in a long time that is through the proposed Lockwood development. And then we have a development on Packard closer to town that is exactly the kind of transit oriented development that a lot of people want to see, kind of that missing middle housing close to a bus line and that could be, for someone who maybe doesn't want to have a car or live a very car light lifestyle. So, excited to see all of those developments coming
Great.
to the ward.
Yeah, and that, of course, each development is in a different stage. So which development seems to be closest to being finished? Do you know?
I'm not exactly sure because they've just been approved fairly recently.
So it's a ways down the line.
It's a ways down the road, but it seemed like a little while. All the proposed development was happening in Ward 3. So Travis, Regina, and I were really busy, and we were working very closely with planning staff to make sure that some of those constituent concerns were responded to, and so that was a great.
And of course, throughout the city, there is also development. So it's just nice to know that your ward is all part of that new excitement.
Especially around the affordable housing, yes.
Right. So Julie, we have so many important topics to discuss. Let's start with the budget, which I know you're working on, and I know there's a general understanding that due to the pandemic and a lot of a lack of the same kind of income the city's getting, the budget is going to reflect not having the same amount of money to spend. And I understand they're looking at a cut through all systems in all departments to cut back. Can you tell us what is the thinking behind that in terms of how do you decide which department? Is it every department that has to be cut, or are you picking and choosing which will be least affected by a cut?
Sure, that's a great question. And the budget is incredibly confusing, right? We're talking about a $470 million budget that has different funds. The money comes from sources, and depending on the source, they have different rules. So, and then we also talk about recurring expenditures, which is a year-to-year, permanent expenditure versus one-time expenditures. So because of the concerns of the city administrator, who used to be our CFO, and we're really fortunate in Ann Arbor that a lot of the, at least preliminary direction we're getting is coming from our finance experts. So, so they know and understand and can look at trends. And the city administrator's recommendation is for basically every department to make a 5% cut in recurring expenditures, which most departments seem to be doing through attrition. I really haven't seen any indication that we're going to have to be laying off staff at this point, but maybe they'll be shifting responsibilities, and that's how most places will, and most departments will handle it. It doesn't mean that in some areas where we need to make a very significant push, for example, in our A20 and our carbon neutrality plan, there are plans to add staff. And it's because we have a really ambitious goal on the housing side of things, because of the new housing millage that opens up the possibility to fund some staff, because if we're going to be building housing on some of those city-owned sites, we can't manage that. And also we recently purchased an affordable senior development. So we're welcoming those staff into the city as they become a housing commission property. And our housing commission has been so successful at getting more vouchers for chronic homeless homeless veterans, that they are able to fund more staff. So sometimes it looks like we're bringing more staff in, but for the most part, we'll be taking about a 5% cut across departments.
Is there any reaction to the idea of cutting back the police force, or is that pretty much only through attrition that you're expecting?
It looks like attrition at this point. The police department has many officers that are eligible or near eligible for retirement. That's true across the city.
Yeah.
So, but particularly in public safety, because it actually comes up pretty quickly when someone reaches that that time. So I do believe that we'll be able to make those cuts through attrition, and then it's part of a much broader conversation about what is policing going to look like going forward. One initiative that we don't know how much it's going to cost, but I'm really excited to be getting a start on, is looking into how we can have unarmed response for certain kinds of calls, and in partnership with the county community mental health, because that's critical, and it really represents what most of our community wants to see.
Right. And from what I understand, you're looking at having some kind of service that might not be what a regular policeman does, but it could be servicing people in which there's not really a crime, but they're in need of some kind of social service, for instance, or
yes, and so many calls.
Medical service. And if you take that responsibility away from the local cop and give it to someone else, then their services are also in the right place where they really need to be needed.
Right. And we hear that from our officers. A lot of them don't want to be responding to things that they're not trained to do, right? So, and then I think an example that I've had a conversation with, we meet with the leadership in AAPD monthly, is around reluctance of our Asian American community to report hate crimes. And I've had a discussion with the chief and the DCs about, well, do you want to be sending a uniformed person? Do you need to be sending a police officer to, and what kind of message? Why is that intimidating? Have you thought about different kinds of partnerships with leaders in the community that could help increase reporting, but also make the community feel safe? And I don't think we need an armed person to go take a report of a hate crime.
So basically, there's still talks on how to work this out, right?
It is in its infancy.
So how it can really become, so that'll take a little while to kind of work out all logistics and
But we
everything.
have some money in the budget set aside for getting that process started.
That's great. That's great. And what kind of information are you looking for from your constituents in terms of the budget? What kind of input are you looking for?
I guess it's, so much of honestly what we're doing is these are decisions that are made very much on the margins, right? We know where the majority of our money is going. So where the controversy is and tends to be, more along these lines. And I have been getting, not just through emails, but I think when we saw the affordable housing millage pass with such a large margin, that is data from my constituents, right? It's, in some ways more meaningful than a single email, not that we don't encourage that. But, I think if there's something that citizens want to see or are concerned, that they should absolutely communicate that to us. I do think with the constraints that we have this year, I'm hopeful that we won't see as many amendments to the budget because we do have to be careful about particularly what we add in. But we can't be everywhere in the city, right? So we depend on our residents to tell us what they see, what's important to them, and we want to hear from a diverse set of residents. And I know our staff have been doing some pretty intensive training around community engagement to make sure that when we do engage in those efforts, that we are hearing from those voices that we don't always hear from traditionally.
And do you get some input from other cities like Ann Arbor as to how they're dealing with this? Is there any interaction with other cities? I mean,
in terms of how they're dealing with budget constraints and
no, just community engagement, that issue.
Well, I know the person who did our training, came from the outside, and we do look at peer communities for all sorts of decisions that we're making. I don't have a network of other council members in other cities that we chat with, aside from a few friends on Facebook, but but our staff, our professional staff, do engage in, our city administrator traditionally has gone to meetings with other Big 10 city administrators, right? They do have these regional networks that they work through to be sharing best practices with one another.
Well, we were already halfway through the show and we have lots more to talk about. Okay. So after the break, we'll go on to another subject, which I know will interest our viewers.
I'm looking forward to it.
This is Bonnie Gabowitz for Ward Talk. We're talking with Julie Grand, and we'll be back. And meanwhile, don't forget that you can contact us at ctn@a2gov.org, attention Ward Talk, or twitter.com/CTN Ann Arbor. We'd love to hear from you and get questions and comments. We'll be right back.
We want everyone in Ann Arbor to be safe. Which is why Ann Arbor has a law requiring drivers to be 5 feet while passing bicyclists, pedestrians, or wheelchairs traveling on the road. Most traffic lanes within the city are at least 10 feet wide, so give half a lane width of space for safety's sake. This is a good way to measure how much space is required. And if it isn't safe to pass, don't. Be cautious, be patient, and most of all, be safe.
Hi, this is Bonnie Gabowitz, host of Ward Talk. We're speaking with Julie Gran from Ward 3. And Julie, there's just so much going on right now that's actually quite controversial. We've been looking at changes within the council since the November election. We have a different makeup of council members. And I know there was a lot of discussion about how the council works as a group. Before we get into talking about your job as a council member and how you work together, the admin committee was mentioned quite a bit by our legal counsel, Mr. Postema. And could you just explain briefly what the admin committee does? Because it seemed that there were some jobs that they had, but I'm still a little confused as to how it relates to what the council does.
Sure. So I serve on the Council Administration Committee and have for a number of years now. We talk about upcoming agenda items. We also are the point committee for the review of the two staff members that we are responsible for hiring and firing, which are the city attorney and the city administrator. So we help with their annual evaluation process. This last cycle we decided, because there was so much overlap, and it was a frustration of mine sitting on the admin committee, that when something was coming up that was really a rule, that we had a separate rules committee, and in the past that had been one committee. So we decided to give merging those two a try. So this year the council admin committee has also been spending a lot of time tweaking our rules to try to make our meetings shorter and therefore more accessible to the public, and to try to just raise the level of discussion and civility in that space.
Right. And let's get right into the hot topic here.
Sure.
This week, you had a meeting, the council had a meeting, and there was a decision dealing with Councilmember Hayner. And Mr. Postema had suggested waiting 2 weeks for him to put all the information as to what all the questions and answers were that involved deciding whether Councilmember Hayner keeps his positions on certain committees, extra responsibilities. It's all very confusing to me because it was something that Mr. Hayner posted on his public, in his public format, and yet there was a lot of reaction to it. And the council members had various points of view that were quite intense. So what's going on? And I would think it's very, very difficult right now, because it seems that this situation is something that hasn't happened in the past. This is all new ground, so to speak. Is how do you deal with a council member whose actions have created a reaction that's affecting the community? And how far can you go as a unit to change his responsibilities?
So I appreciate the question. This has been a really difficult week for our community, and I know there's a lot to unpack. So starting with the action and why was this different than what we've seen in the past. Councilmember Hayner chose to attack the press using a word that's not acceptable in any context. It was harmful to the LGBTQ community. It was harmful to others. And when elected officials, including my other, co-ward representative, Travis Redina, but also County Commissioner Katie Scott and others reached out to him, explaining from a really personal perspective why that was harmful. He chose to double down. He didn't apologize. He didn't listen. He didn't acknowledge the harm.
So I think it's important for the citizens to know that there was an attempt for some personal connection and discussion.
100%.
I think that's important for everybody to know.
Yes.
Okay,
So
go
it
ahead.
wasn't just about the use of the homophobic slur. It was also about when there was outreach to try to calmly explain why, and really, sharing of personal stories, that the reaction to it was dismissive and furthered the harm from my perspective. So as a member of the admin committee, what can we do? So there, as the admin committee, there's a formal process. At this point, although we are going to be changing our rules very shortly, there wasn't a clear violation of an administrative or ethics rule that would trigger the process for counseling or reprimand. And reprimand is basically our equivalent of censure. So that didn't make sense. And that was done with the advice of, confirmed by legal counsel. So what could we do when we were hearing very clearly from parents, from the LGBTQ community, from others that were harmed by these actions? What could we say and what steps could we take that would respond to this? And it is within our power, and Mr. Postma made that very clear. Now, Mr. Postma is wonderful and does a great job protecting the legal interests of the city by being incredibly conservative, and he likes process and he likes things to be done just so. But it was clear during that meeting that even if he were to go back for a couple weeks, that the answer to the fundamental question of, is this within our power as a council, of our purview as a council to remove someone from committees and commissions, that the mayor and the council have the ability to do that. Because we vote people in, it also means we can vote people out.
So let me just ask you, I really want to get a clear picture of this. The idea of removing him from these extra responsibilities, is that because you don't trust that he'll behave in a way that's affrontive, or is it a way, what's the purpose of taking him off some committees that might not have anything to do with what he was posting?
This has become bigger than just about Jeff Hayner, right? This is really, what is a response that's appropriate to the community for the harm that's been done? And what is within our ability to say, and whether he uses this additional time to reflect and change his behavior is really, that's, and what I was upset about during a lot of that discussion is they were making it about like, but this isn't like, what does this have to do with his ability to serve on parks? He's lost a lot of trust with people in the community, and we're not stripping him of his power to make any decisions, right? He's going to come to council, he's going to vote. It really is signaling to the community, this was harmful. We recognize that. We're taking steps to respond to that. There's a suggestion that he engage in more restorative acts, right, and education, but that's really up to him, because you can't force anyone to change their behavior or to change their thinking about things. And honestly, even in some communications that have come after that meeting, I'm trying not to be pessimistic about it, but I'm not seeing signals that he's wanting to engage in that kind of behavior. And I know that, you know, you wanted to talk more broadly about, you know, how are we working together? How is this getting us to work forward? But I've been doing this for 6.5 years, and there has never been a good idea that I haven't supported, right? And it's a lot of double negatives. I apologize, but basically what it means is if there's a good idea that helps our community, I don't care where it's coming from. And we can never work with more than 5 of us at a time due to Open Meetings Act violations. So we can't all 11 of us work together on policy to bring it to the table. That would be unethical.
Mhm.
So you have to pick and choose who you work with. And, you know, if it can be difficult, I'll be really straightforward about it. I'm not going to necessarily want to reach out to those who've broken my trust. Or who've gone out of their way to, anytime I have a policy disagreement with them, accuse me or my colleagues of somehow playing politics, or even worse, or in one case, even taking bribes, right? Because there was a policy disagreement. But at the same time, if, you know, it's really up to those who've been the cause of losing trust to also reach out. It has to work both ways. And I'm not proud of how this has all gone down the last few years, but what I keep trying to do and why I stay in it is because I wanted, you know, I care about our city, and I want us to work on affordable housing, on climate change, on safety, on making us, you know, an inclusive community. And so I stay in it for those reasons. And I think that we're actually moving forward with a lot of positive. Even at that last meeting, as painful as it was, and as painful as we've had conversations, difficult conversations about race. And there was a lot of harm done there too, right? About, you know, should we even question? We had a conversation about questioning white terrorism and white supremacy, and condemning that. That should never happen from my perspective. But you've got to push forward, because we're also at that last meeting, we're moving forward on affordable housing on city-owned properties, on making it on our climate change goals, right? So I'm hoping that we can focus on the good, and there's a lot of good that we can still do, but this doesn't make it easier, that's for sure.
And in the last minute that we have left, let's end on a positive note.
Sure.
And let's hear from you about what you look forward to and how things can improve. You know, what do you see in the near future that look like things are going to get better?
Sure. I mean, I'm really inspired by the passage of the affordable housing millage in this last year, and what kind of commitment our community made. I'm encouraged by what I hear at the federal level. I think we have a lot of shovel-ready projects through our sustainability office that, if we can tap into some federal funding, that we can really be a leader in this area again. So I think there's a growing understanding at all levels of the housing crisis, and the importance that we want to make our land use and zoning more inclusionary and less exclusionary, and to be able to provide opportunities for other people to both live and work here and to contribute to our community. I'm really excited about those changes that are on the horizon.
All right. Thank you so much, Julie, for sharing your thoughts and explanations. It's everything seems to be complicated, so I appreciate your bringing it down to simpler terms.
Okay, well, I'm so glad. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here, and you know, appreciate the interest.
And keep up the good work, and good luck.
Thank you so much.
This is Bonnie Gabowitz for Ward Talk. Be sure to check in with us at twitter.com/CTN Ann Arbor, or you can write to us with questions or comments at ctn@a2gov.org. Attention, Ward Talk. I'm Bonnie Gabowitz. Until next month.